of that, I did, my best job to walk through some of the documentation you and I put together around Splunk and why it's such a meaningful partnership for, I discussed a little bit about invoking that HGTP call from their core platform versus the HTTP call and why that's so game changing. So maybe you can unpack that a little bit for everyone, why the Splunk partnership is meaningful, and then we'll go on to some of these other questions.
Oh, yeah. I mean, really quickly. So Splunk in itself is really just a stream of data. I'm sorry. Under its hood, what Splunk actually is just a data pipeline that streams, metadata about people's programs and infrastructure into some type of a repository. So, the idea here and sort of what we are pitching to them is to replace HTTP as their communications layer to use HGTP. And the reason why is because sending data over HTTP creates a irrefutable trace of all the program execution within your distributed system. So it's just another layer of security that you really can't get by just trying to create some kind of ad hoc check in with the certificate authority at different stages of the data pipeline. It's a really bad way of describing what it actually looks like in the real world, but I've done that before and it sucks. So that's kind of what we aim to provide, and the goal is to create a Splunk product with added security.
Love it. Yeah, that's awesome. The tracer and traceability is kind of the game changer there. While I've got the mic, everybody who is on, appreciate you being here. Just mute your phones or mute your mics. That would be helpful. All right, so Mr. Wyatt, what is a hybrid node compared with a normal node? When Wyatt says, what we have done is created a framework for formal verification in such a way that we are able to verify the state of the distributed system using only types. What does he mean, different data types?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to start, this is sort of a two-part answer. One is, I think I'm going to provide some context first. Why do we even care about whatever the hell those words mean? When we think about what a distributed application is, we're trying to verify the execution of some type of program that's running on infrastructure that we don't necessarily know the full state about. So the Ethereum solves this using this thing called the EVM, where they spin up this virtual machine that is standardizable. And so they're able to verify something called an opcode, which is a type of a bytecode that's used for a VM. The JVM, for instance, uses opcodes, and we can get into that. But basically, you can use opcodes in order to, verify, what these different data types are, and also sort of, how to put this, some type of a topological ordering to events when interacting with some type of an object running on these VMs. So in essence, we want to try and create a reproducible environment on other computers, such that programs can run in a verify or in a way that we know that they're going to actually execute correctly, and also prevent against Sybil attacks and stuff. So the approach with the EVM is solely focused on finding a way to create a custom, I guess you could say, platform on different node types of servers. And so this is difficult because it doesn't really allow for extensibility around your ability to use the resources of the infrastructure that you're on. I mean, you're stuck inside of a sandbox, so you can't really do any meaningful computation. Last time I checked, the EVM actually isn't Turing complete because they limit the amount of I think the stack size to a fixed amount, which was thought to be a security, benefit. So just let's fast forward here. Figuring out how to verify programs and also proofs, which are programs, just depends on what field you're talking about. This problem is an open area of research and something that are on tools that we call proof solvers. And so basically what they do is they use the power of this type of math called homotopy type theory in order to learn and encode topological information such that we can, prove a statement using, just a program or a compiler. So the language to a program and a compiler, which takes that. So Basically, we have the most famous one is called COQ, and this is like really common in like the math world. So basically, what we did was sort of bridge the main goal of what smart contract platforms, really any Oracle network, is trying to do, which is try to one, understand information about its external state and then reason about it while also being able to hold other members of its network accountable. If we were to frame the Oracle problem in that way, we're able to do that without trying to limit the types of programs that can be written. So the TLDR here is that instead of creating a sandbox, we actually just created a way, or rather, we've created a distributed interpreter such that basically it interacts with different microservices, as opposed to like how Ethereum tries to call itself the global computer, by standardizing the resources available to every programmer as though it is just one computer that you have.
Thanks, Wyatt. It's a good thing we're recording this so that people can take a chance to replay some of that and unpack it. But I think it's great to bridge the next piece of this question to help kind of demystify something you said in the past. When Wyatt says a type 2 developer, an infrastructure tool guy that works at Mongo, Spark, etc., what they will do instead of writing smart contracts of Ethereum, they instead will create connector pieces for specific data types and specific interfaces. Do you mean connector pieces like AWS, Splunk, etc.? And how does that fit in the hypergraph? So this might be a good chance to talk a little bit about smart contracts versus state channels, but based off of that description, what do you mean by connector pieces?
Yeah, totally. Really quickly, I apologize to break the flow, but where are you reading these questions? I think I'm on the wrong chat. Is this just the main lattice?
No, this is in the chat of Zoom.
Oh, fuck. Okay, great. I just wanted to be able to look at it so I can read this. Okay, cool. Okay, so where are we? Let's go to the top. Hybrid node compared to a normal node. Oh, and then, okay, sorry. So the answer I just gave to you about like the formal verification, that was the answer to that part. I didn't actually touch upon what a hybrid node was. But basically, like consensus is literally just a process. So like I can write a script to launch all the processes a DAG node needs, as well as an LTX node, or some of the other projects we have picking next year, all in one node. So basically, a developer or a person who wants to launch a node writes a script, which is kind of like the equivalent of like a smart contract, which just basically initializes the processes of consensus of any different state channel that you want your server to be working on. So you can have a server, your node run whatever state channels you want, totally configurably. And this is because we're a network of, subnets that don't necessarily, that are totally operate in parallel to the main DAG chain. So as opposed to, waiting for, our blockchain, or sorry, our DAG to converge to some sort of state, you can just sort of live off in its own realm. And you basically just, can customize your node to just earn tokens about whatever you want to, from validator rewards. Sorry about that. So, and then just to mention the type 2 developer, maybe, I don't know what I meant by that, but I will say though that, yeah, so, when you're actually building some type of a backend, if we want to try and like verify system state, we do that by typically trying to host our servers in a hermetically sealed environment, or connect everything through some kind of a centralized certificate authority. And so in that kind of a situation, we have certain, how do I put this? It is a less difficult problem to solve than to get it solved in like a distributed way. Trying to access who can do what in what part of your process. And so because it's simpler, we're able to take advantage of the type of magic that exists by looking at data types alone. And so sort of the magic of like what we did was try to bridge how people build normal backends without the kind of constraints of, like a real open world distributed system. It's incredibly difficult. I mean, like, ISPs have, obviously there's IPv6 and stuff, but like, standards for how they want to handle their own security. And so this was a goal. The goal here was to bridge those two worlds so that, developers, even in like the data space, who might see limitations to how they could, deploy distributed, like embedded systems, This would sort of fix that out of the box by just using a new transfer protocol. And so that's kind of what I was getting into there. And so what I mean by a linked list is that a blockchain is like a linked list, whereas a DAG is like a graph. So whenever you think about processes happening in parallel, we always describe those typically in what we call an event DAG, which is a directed acyclic graph of different events, and events that are happening at the same time are within the same topological order. So yeah. And nodes and statements, yeah. So that was a lot. Just want to unpack that all. Sorry.
No, I think it's great, man. I think that I like to often explain to people that we're actually not a blockchain, because we're not linear in nature. We're more of a block graph. So it helps people understand that perspective a little bit better. I love it. Okay, so looking at some of the questions here, one of the things that folks are looking for are use cases to better ground this. And maybe we can talk about the tax auditing piece and a little bit about how that piece works. But I've been pushing a lot of energy into us being a state channel company. And that 2021 and beyond is really all about state channels that bring forth an amazing array of capabilities such as micropayments, microservices, and so forth. But often, and I've noticed this when working in federal, is that everybody is talking about the power of smart contracts. And I have to educate them on the difference between us or state channels, not necessarily us, but the idea of state channels and smart contracts. So maybe you can start by talking about how I've said that state channels are like smart contracts with superpowers, and I think that's probably a gross limitation to it, a reduction. But maybe you can explain a little bit about the difference between state channels and smart contracts and why we see ourselves as a state channel company.
Totally. That's great. Thanks, Diggles. You want me to answer this one about Bitcoin's Lightning Network? I was actually talking to Frank about that the other day. So functionally, actually, like the mechanics of how Lightning works by processing information off-chain and then committing only like the result of that data processing job or whatever, which in this case is to, try and speed up and cross, whatever the fuck, I don't want to get into it, but that is actually functionally the same. So how we actually want to update the ledger is the same mechanic. So you can really sort of conceptually think about state channels as being off-chain, data. But the thing about our state channels is that they run consensus too. I mean, they have verification about the data, the total like trace of the system where the data was coming from, and et cetera. So that's kind of the key differentiator. We are like when you create a Constellation project or you want to tokenize something, you're creating your own base layer protocol and merely finding a way to connect with other base layers. And so this is how we're fundamentally going to, and I can say confidently, I don't think any other protocol is ever really going to be able to scale out this. Other people have taken similar approaches, but it's got to be the base layer. And there's many other reasons why that don't even have to do with technical and just sort of where I think policy in the world's going. So yeah, it's a little differentiator there.
Sweet.
Yeah, and I can answer the one about the Lattice exchange too. So next year, yay, we were doing a bunch of roadmap stuff recently too. We've got honestly, you may know is manic. It happened during COVID, which sucks. We didn't really get to party, but hopefully we'll be able to do this again with 2.0. So it's gonna be a big release, and that encapsulates the mechanics of what we'll need in order to create and interact with different state channels, or rather for state channels to interact with each other. And that also includes a refactor of our Constellation node. So kind of our milestone achievement is that we're taking what is in this project called Tessellation. I created this, you can just take a look at it, but we're going to re-implement the initialization of our Constellation node using that. It's going to happen throughout Q1. And then once that's done, it's pretty much the same thing as LTX. So, we're going to be taking that re-implementation and adding some of the features that connect to DeFi there. And so that's when we're actually going to connect to the Hypergraph. That's sort of the roadmap in those 2 quarters. So stay tuned at the beginning of next year. And yeah, actually phase 2 is the bridge. It's implemented. Yeah, that's already in progress. So yeah, phase 3 is that. So shooting at probably Q2 next year. is a conservative estimate. But we also have other stuff coming out too as well, which is kind of cool. Maybe I can hint at other projects that will be coming out around that time as well. So it's kind of cool to have like an ecosystem of different like networks all running different microservices. It's happening. Can you guys hear me?
I can when you talk.
Okay. Are you looking at some of these questions too, Diggles?
Yeah, I was thinking like back earlier, I'm going to keep on hammering the state channel thing. I think that there's just a lot of desire around it, considering, us being positioned as an infrastructure company and state channels being the pathways for things like ICOs built on top of Hypergraph. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, because that's a pretty exciting frontier. We saw this big bust happen with a lot of these Ethereum ICOs, not only because a lot of the teams couldn't execute on their vision, but the technology just wasn't in place to support some of the grandiose impact that these projects were looking to create. So maybe we could talk a little bit about state channels in relation to ICOs and applications. And I just want to keep on getting as much out of that topic as possible.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I mean, I got a similar one too I can drop, which is about chain links. So someone said that, I've started actually, by the way, to start framing us as like the Oracle network. You'll see that in like one of the two papers I'm working on, but I'm doubling down on it. It's kind of like what's different. It's like, it's not just a ledger, it's an Oracle. And so to answer somebody's question here, do we not need a partner like Chainlink? The positioning here is for us to actually add value to Chainlink. So Chainlink is pretty limited by only being able to operate on the EVM. And so we saw a really great opportunity to try and, create, products and value within their ecosystem to expand beyond what Ethereum can provide.
So one of the questions here is, what can a state channel do that a smart contract cannot do?
Yeah, totally. So a state channel can oracleize off-chain data and perform consensus on that data. So like a lot of you, there's only one library that was created, I believe, called Oracleize for Ethereum. Maybe I'm wrong, but I should Google that. But when I was writing smart contracts, that was the only thing out there. And there was a huge limitation because there's really no security associated to the actual like there's no end-to-end security to understand where data was created and then to oracleize that onto the chain. It's basically just a bridge to try and stamp something that has been trusted and accepted, as opposed to consensus only being performed on some type of a ledger balance. We perform consensus on the state of some type of a like actual physical system and or the state of data in transit. So let's say that I wanted to create an oracle that would, let's take in a stream of tweets or something. And anytime that I see a certain hashtag, give someone a point, and everyone can choose what points they are. We can make this dumb game. There's no real guarantee that you can have about where that data came from unless you create some kind of an end-to-end, secure pipeline. Typically, those are called like relays, and it basically just means that you have a trusted server and that you can't actually use any of the power of consensus on the data itself. Because Ethereum sandbox themselves, they cannot use consensus on user-defined data types. They can only use it on what's inside the EVM. And so none of this is really like, you can't do consensus on your own data. It's just, it will never be compatible. You get 5 or whatever they provide and you're done. So what makes us different is that, let's say that I wanted to create a game on your phone, like a real-time video game. And I wanted to guarantee that this player and each player wasn't cheating because we're betting on some type of value. Every single move that is made by the player is immediately notarized on chain, is accepted in any way. And you can basically have some kind of remediation to prevent someone from, trying to cheat in this game. Whereas like in Ethereum, you basically have to rely upon the nodes themselves in order to make sure that certain transactions with certain smart contracts happen in the right order let alone even to have some kind of a guarantee about the civil nature of, the nodes themselves, that we're hosting this dApp on Ethereum. You have no guarantees. Whereas in our network, that is like intrinsically written within the DAG. So the TLDR here is that what we've created really should be conceptualized. I mean, for everybody in the crypto space, like the concept of a smart contract and the concept of a contract comes from this verification world, where we define what our system, or what we call software service level agreements, or what our requirements are within this contract, and we try to create a system that will uphold those requirements. It's just nomenclature. What we really want to do is create a new communications protocol that is able to create, some type of a verification chain about all the actions in our network. Does that like maybe explain it a little bit more? Like Ethereum's just a black box, and you can't get data in the chain without sort of accepting it. We prevent data from going in the chain, or we can take data that's fake and put it on the chain if that's what your use case is. So it's not just ledgers anymore, people.
Right. I often talk about how a smart contract secures the ledger balance, but a state channel can secure the contents within the ledger. Right. And that may be an oversimplification of what you just said there, but that really allows for layers of different services to exist, which currently doesn't. So no, that was great. Sweet. Let's see what other questions we got here. And if there's nothing else, I can throw you. It looks like maybe I missed the part and lattice explanation of the roadmap. Victor just dropped a good one there.
Let me look. Is that at the bottom? Victor, does that mean you can receive the data before you create the verification instead of having the verification in place before the data is there? Yes, that's correct. That means I can accept anything. And if I just spin up a bunch of nodes and say, do consensus on what this stream of tweets are, then before, we can literally do consensus on whether or not GNIP, the Twitter Firehose provider, is actually meeting their SLA. We could do that as an experiment. We could just launch a cluster, stream it, and make sure that we get the same results when we run queries, as we're trying to subscribe to the hashtag. That's how their API works. I just happened to use it once upon a time. So yeah, man, I mean, that's the point. We can do consensus on the physical real world now, not just some kind of thing that we want to, some virtualized sandbox. No, we do consensus on physical state. And that's what the Air Force wants to do. They want to figure out, do consensus in all their devices about what's the state of their network to get a global situational awareness. And that's what's game changing.
I love it. Layered consensus. All right, one from Headroom here. Are state channels like separate island states that have their own rules and regulations and still transact with one another?
Yeah, pretty much. Basically, like the role of DAG is to be, I could simplify everything and say what DAG does is it creates a time out of all the concurrent events. It creates a synthetic, like linear ordering of everything. And what I mean by that is that there are certain rules in place that make sure that data that's transferred is normalized, or rather that like the total balances held by different state channels can't ever exceed a total amount within the network. It has to always equal one. All those kind of mechanics happen intrinsically under the hood on like numeric data, which is something that's required for just the nuts and bolts of HGTP to work. So to answer your question, if you launch a state channel, for your state channel and your nodes and the product or service or community that you want to reach, you can define whatever rules that you want. There just is a set of rules, which is our token economic model, which we use in order to both communicate data, communicate and cohere the wider HTTP network together, but also in order to make sure that value is conserved. Utilities conserve like energy. It's actually in the white paper. Who is that from? Was that Headroom? I think you're on the Token Econ email list.
Well, and that's I think I don't know how much you want to share, but I know that you've been working hard on our new token economics model that we're going to be pushing out here in Q1. and there's some pretty exciting stuff there. I know that I'm pretty pumped about it, but not sure if you want to share anything there or if you want me to come up with another question.
No, I mean, I absolutely would love to. I didn't really get a chance. I was on another interview the other day and I didn't really get a chance to, talk about it. But yeah, so token economics, man, economics in general. Nobody knows the hell they're doing. We're all trying to figure this out. I spent a lot of time when I first created this project. I was really focused on just creating HTTP, and over time, due to many events and just sort of understanding everything, I realized the importance of token economy and community. I think that, there is an issue in crypto that I'm not going to talk about the real world, but there's an issue in crypto that I see that is hindering all of our growth. And so Constellation to me is not just to be a crypto company. We're trying to build a new layer to the internet, right? So we want to span all parts of engineering. How can we address the fundamental issue, which is that the price of a token is coupled with what people think about a project? Like it doesn't make any sense. Like you're dealing with and I'm not going to go into that whole situation here, but in success in crypto is wholly and fundamentally, from what it seems like, and at least in the headlines and what a lot of people ask of us to do all the time, how can you just pump a token price and create some kind of like a synthetic, artificial value to, just a thing? And so there really needs to be a utility to these tools in order to self-regulate. And I mean that, like, to self-regulate. And so the point here is that we need to decouple the way in which projects are created and governed from, some kind of a fixed token supply. We need to think about directly what are projects doing for the ecosystem within a unit of value that may be, represented or coupled by some kind of a financial one, but it is mainly a measure of utility. And in the case of our economic model, and the economic model I'm proposing, it's called generative economics, is meant to be a generalized framework for how we can create token economies in the future, just for every project. I'm proposing everyone do this because it prevents scam ICOs, because the value of a state channel is tied directly to the performance of node operators, not necessarily people just buying on the network. There is still a liquidity pool element to it, but we are fundamentally trying to see this as investment in groups of people as opposed to just some type of a token or a scam. And the goal here is to try and create a generative system that is able to self-regulate itself and try to create some type of a complexity that can handle the new types of products and services that we want. And so that was a lot, but I will just say two other things. One is that the magic of how this works is that we've created, I guess I'll call it this. I've basically took apart what is the concept of a transaction, and I created this new kind of dual object called an emission. And an emission is essentially a vectorized representation of utility and value that has been, utility and the value of all DAG that a person has that they have invested into another state channel token. So to buy ETH, you have to buy one of, ERC20. You can basically take your DAG balance inside of your address and shift that into sort of like an indexed array of different positions on different state channels. And so this creates a two-sided marketplace where providers are the node operators themselves who want to provide resources for different state channels based upon interests, like people investing in a liquidity pool or being a part of a project. And it also creates another side of consumers who might want access to resources. And so those who are sort of staking resources that can then be shared by the underlying protocol helps remove any kind of how do I put this? It helps force individuals to invest directly within the utility that's being created by state channels, as opposed to just having some kind of random color token. And I'm going to go into a lot more detail on that, but the goal here is to create a symbiotic ecosystem that's going to live on much longer than how long Bitcoin's been alive so far. And I think that this has overarching implications in our current economy. And actually, one of the cool nuggets I'll drop, and I'll take a pause, there's a lot of shit, is that up until this point, I've always said that, we don't necessarily need a domain-specific language. But also, since we don't have a smart contract platform, it didn't really seem necessary, or like, how would we do this? I'm excited to announce that we do have one that I've named Babel. And it is meant to be a language for, like, one, our interface with HTTP, which is actually like an interpreter, and two, based upon what I've got so far, is I believe that this is actually a potential solution to creating lossless compilation, or rather, how could we take something like a machine learning model in that is like a deep neural net that has some embedding space that makes no sense to a human brain that lives in the Euclidean world, and describe that in some type of a syntax. And Babel is going to be an interface to both of those, to the machines talking back at us. So the goal here is to try and use that to restructure both governance and a token model that provides value for everybody.
Man, you're a rock star, buddy. I hope everybody caught a lot of that, and a lot of that needs to be kind of pulled out of this. The focus on the utility and the value attached to true utility, which is, I think, the
Right.
vision that most of these projects had, outside of the scammers that were just trying to, pump and dump, but that governance across all of them to prove that utility. I mean, we talk about machine-to-machine transactions, and there's an exchange of value that takes place there, but that value needs to be regulated against some form of utility. You know what I'm saying? And it's that symbiotic relationship you're talking about. And, that's why DAG is like the ultimate utility, which is really exciting. One of the questions that someone had is, hey, Wyatt, does this mean that we're able to invest and create pools from the Molly wallet on the Lattice exchange?
To be totally honest, I'm not sure if that's going to be on the Molly wallet, or we want to do that in like a browser extension. I have to ask Frank, but the truth is it can be anywhere. It's just sort of like when we roll that out. So how the interface to LTX, it's going to be similar to how we interact with a smart contract or DAG. I mean, you basically will just form a transaction that tries to, encode some kind of metadata about an operation you want to do, and you just send it to an endpoint. So it's either going to be on Molly, or it's actually, I don't think it's going to be on Molly. I think we're going to do the browser extension, because we want to focus on just getting stuff that uses the JavaScript SDK. So I think the answer is, that. Sorry.
Is Lattice Exchange using state channels?
It will be in the full phase 3 launch, which is slated for, I'd say, like, end of Q1, early Q2 of next year. Or at least like we have to figure out the launch closer to the date. So don't hold me to it, but we'll be done with it.
And how can we get more involved or integrate Lattice into our personal projects?
Oh yeah, dope. So right now, Lattice is just a smart contract. It is the DeFi half of a bridge. And so, yeah, you can interact with the ERC20 component. But I would say stay tuned for all of our documentation on state channels. It's going to be coming out next year in Q1. So once you see all those walkthroughs and demos and stuff, it should be pretty self-explanatory to see, how you can build, with HTTP.
Cool. Well, I think I've exhausted the list of questions here in the right rail. Is anybody that wants to unmute and speak face-to-face to the demigod himself and ask Wyatt a question?
I was going to say, I think we got all the questions, but if anybody doesn't want to step up, do you guys have any exciting news or anything that you're looking forward to the remainder of this month?
Well, I think one thing that I would love to just touch on is that tax regulation use case with Wyatt. And maybe it's, I think where people are missing the boat, this is on the business side, is everybody is comparing all the technology, and I'm not discrediting what Wyatt's done by even the furthest extent. It is amazing. But where a lot of these projects are missing the boat, where I'm seeing, I know you guys have heard me talk about this, is on the DevOps side, the ability to deploy. And, there's these rich industries like tax regulation and telco. And so a lot of areas where the efficiencies or visibility or security or auditability is far lackluster. It's really a lot of optimization to be had. And so, when I'm thinking about our technology from a DevOps perspective, Wyatt, maybe you can just talk about why our solution is such a game changer from a development standpoint on its ability to deploy in these existing IT workflows.
Yeah, I mean, look, so the idea that somehow the entire existing computing infrastructure we use for the internet, all of the backends and the consumer apps that you access today, and typically some kind of a microservices architecture, to somehow try and get them to move 10 years backwards to work with a set of tools that simply don't understand what they need to move forwards, it's never going to happen. I mean, I'll tell you, because I'm a real programmer, most people in the ordinary software engineering space in Silicon Valley think crypto is a total joke. And the reason why is because people are proposing this concept of let's just have a distributed system run in serial. It's the dumbest thing I've heard of in so long. Part of the reason why I got into it, because I saw the potential of how if we could just scale this, we could get so much done. So the TLDR here is that instead of trying to find a way to create a secure relay to connect to a smart contract to somehow treat Ethereum as though it's a more secure database than a sharded MySQL one with a proper cert authority. Yeah, I mean, basically you can just launch an HTTP server the same way you launch an HTTP server. So in your existing program, let's say that you're a backend developer. I have a backend, I have an API. I want to add an endpoint to have security. I just do import Constellation. I do new whatever HTTP server context, whatever, in a few lines, I can basically send data over that secure, channel that has been verified. I mean, this is totally game changing because this is something that I would actually use and that I could actually propose to a boss when I still had a day job. Ethereum is, this concept of a virtualized instance is just in enterprise, it's they tried it and they gave up on it years ago. I mean, that's what we've learned from, the, PwC and the, people we've talked to is it's I mean, Consensus has so much more firepower than us. It's just well,
Yeah,
I believe our thesis.
It's certainly one of the areas that makes us attractive. I mean, I've shared this in the past that, our DoD engagements, one of the requirements is that we're not allowed to make changes to existing IT infrastructure. And that pretty much counts out most blockchain projects, so that's a big kudos to you, which leads me to, it looks like we have one last question, which you were just talking about this the other day, which is pretty cool. It's a question about exchanges. All of a sudden, HIT BTC has added DAG to the exchange. Did you guys know about that? And does this mean an SDK is ready so exchanges can add DAG easier, like a plugin for us to be able to be absorbed by an exchange at any given point? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%. So, Victor's, anyway, Sarbarita, sorry, I couldn't read your name, but yeah, so I think it's really funny. So, we didn't quite have a full JavaScript SDK when we launched mainnet. I mean, we had the Java implementation as our ref, and we'll always have that. But yeah, we have a proper JavaScript SDK that can be downloaded at any time. It's on the Stardust Collective project on GitHub. And so anyone who wants to integrate via that SDK can do so now. And so, yeah, we do have that in place. We also did have HitBC list us, I believe, or that was one of the ones we're working on. We have a couple of them at any given time that are trying to do an integration. So I think they're the most recent. Yeah. Kudos.
Yeah, very cool. We just need a fancy SDK to bypass listing fees. Oh, boy. Okay, well, very good. I mean, I know that we're wrapping up here probably a few minutes earlier than expected, but if anybody doesn't, we can keep it open here for another minute or so. If anybody wants to slide any last minute questions here for Wyatt while we have them.
Yeah, totally.
I have a question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
My question is, what feature, Wyatt, of DAG or Lattice are you the most excited to release?
Oh, dude, totally. So, I'm leaving. I don't want to spoil it. So I've had this big, huge, and exciting tweet I was gonna do with a demo that's literally we're working on just finishing it. But that is streaming consensus. We can literally take a stream of information and process or run consensus rounds in parallel. And that is completely game changing. So
Cool.
pipe it in and it just kicks off more consensuses as more data gets processed, and it can just do it all in parallel. I mean, it's down to its core, but the guys have been hearing me talk about it. This is my white whale. It's simple.
Well, you've already done a pretty amazing. You've already changed history this year with the launch of Hypergraph in our mainnet. So kudos to you, buddy. For those that don't know, I've been working with Wyatt now for 3 years, a little less than 3 years, and he's consistent. He's brilliant. He's excited. He's inspired. All the great things you'd want in a CTO, and he's managed this awesome team that I've fallen in love with that has delivered around every corner. So props to you, buddy. And Elise, thanks for pulling this together, and everybody that have come to join. And you're going to see more from us, and we're going to continue to rock this out. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to slap them into the community channel and Telegram. We'll do our best to answer them. Otherwise, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you so much, Diggles.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you all. Next week, we'll meet up like we did in the Telegram room again. If you guys have any questions beforehand, we'll prep it. And then next week, I want the community to be more engaging. We're going to start making and producing videos on why Constellation matters to you, because we want to obviously grow our community. We want more people to understand what's going on here. And so we need you guys to do that and help us tell that story. So we're going to expect a lot more from you guys in the next coming weeks, and I can really use your help in marketing. So thank you guys all for everything. And Wyatt, you've been absolutely incredible. The community always asks more from you, so we will pimp him out anytime we can get a hold of him. All right, guys. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Elise. Take care.